Welcome to my show. I'm a guest here. Her name is Lise Coupal. Mrs. Lise, how are you doing, ma?
I'm really well. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lise. And also, thank you so much for the time and the opportunity. Firstly, you are an ICF life coach. You are also a grief educator. Can you please, Mrs. Lise, discuss more about yourself and how you're doing currently now, Mrs. Lise?
Okay. And thank you again for having me on. My path in this work really started from quite a personal space. I am an educator as well, and as a child, I really struggled in school. I had a lisp, and if I had been born 20 years later, I would have been flagged as ADHD. And the teachers back then were not equipped to deal with children like me. They lacked compassion and understanding, and I just didn't like how that felt. And I didn't like feeling underestimated, and I didn't like being put in a box. And our friends and family often do that to us, don't they? So I started trying to figure things out on my own. So at a young age, I became my own speech therapist. And in middle school, I started really honing in on the subjects that I was interested in. And I have to say, it was a slow progression, but eventually ended up graduating with honors from one of the top universities in Canada, which, back then I thought was completely impossible to do when I was younger. And this experience really shaped me and the path that I chose. I became a teacher because I didn't want other children to feel the way I did growing up. Um, and when I graduated from university in my mid-20s, my first role was an education director. And within the first week of my career, my mom died suddenly of a brain aneurysm, and she was only 61 years old. And that moment really changed everything for me. My whole world just shifted, and I realized how fragile and impermanent life is. Um, so after a few years of deep grief, I started saying yes to opportunities that I might have avoided before. I took some emotional risks and career risks. I followed my heart, and I'll be honest, some of the paths that I went down were very difficult. And I understand what it means to struggle, both financially and in relationships and with myself. And after overcoming a series of obstacles, I decided to return to graduate school. And I wanted to gain a deeper understanding of mental health and addictions, partly because of my own family history, but also because I wanted to help others. Um, so this education and work led me into a crisis line. I worked in mental health housing, a public detox facility, bereavement, and hospice work. And across all of those experiences and all the different types of people that I worked with, I kept seeing the same thing. I was working with people who felt lost. And deep down, they all wanted more from their lives, but they didn't know how to access it. And this is what ultimately led me into coaching and grief work, because I think grief stays with us quite a bit in our lives, and learning how to understand it and work through it became quite important to me. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am right now.
Very profound journey, and it is 100% uneasy to be one of the parts of the ADHD as well. And in the early stage, and also having to be with the experience you've had in the early stage in your life, it's also showed a path for you to also be in the position to treat others better and also not make them pass through such situation. And my heart goes to your grandmother, if I'm right, as well, which actually be a part for every single source of everything you've done as well, every single decision that was also changed in regards to the grief and also experience as well, which also upgrade to the point of you being a poor coach today. And
Mhm.
also, Mrs. Lees, I would like to ask if you've written any book or if you are planning to write any books in the coming future, Mrs. Lees.
I think everyone has at least one great book in them, and it's something I've always thought about. So it's in the back of my mind, but it's not on the forefront right now. But I have had clients that have said you need to write a book. So I think that's probably in the works at some point.
All right, Mrs. Lace, I sincerely appreciate you for the great insight. I would like to drive to the point of listeners who could feel deep down that they are capable of more than their current life reflects. How do you think they can begin that inner knowing instead of ignoring it, Mrs. Lace?
Okay. And I think many of us reach a point in our lives when we think, is this it? Is this as good as it's going to get? And it's usually not a dramatic moment. It just kind of shows up as a low level dissatisfaction. And I think what's important to understand is our emotions communicate our needs and our desires, and they're not something to be dismissed. Our emotions really offer important information about our inner world, and they alert us to when there's a gap between our current life and our potential. And it's something really worth exploring. But the problem is when that awareness surfaces, it can feel really overwhelming. So instead of exploring it, people push it down. But the good news is you don't have to change your entire life all at once. It starts with curiosity. So instead of ignoring it, you can ask, what feels missing? What does more look like for me? And when you're vague about what's missing in your life, it kind of feels paralyzing. But when you start getting specific, that's when you have something that you can work with. So it's good to ask yourself if you're comparing yourself to others, is this a genuine pull, or am I just feeling like I need to keep up with everybody else? And people also often fail when they attempt to just overhaul their entire life. So it's important just to start with small, low risk actions and see what sticks. Um, and each time you follow through on something, it actually reinforces trust in yourself. So notice when you're numbing or you're avoiding. So, for instance, when you defer back to social media and you start overworking, or that's all ways that we ignore our inner voices. We just keep ourselves busy so we don't have to deal with what's going on inside of us. And just also don't wait until you feel confident about making a change, because confidence follows after action. So just start tracking what's really energizing you and what's draining you. Patterns here often point directly towards the more that you're looking for. So revisit and redefine your path regularly. It's an ongoing conversation, not a one-time decision. And over time, those small follow-throughs, they build on something really important, which is self-trust.
Sincerely, I sincerely appreciate you for the great insight when it comes to we being in the position to ask ourselves the right questions. It is definitely 100% not easy, but if we give ourselves the reflection to provide ourselves the right question, despite how difficult and also tough it is, it gives us a moment for us to give ourselves some sense of exploration and also know the sense of weakness and also strength and also work we need to also work on as well. So I sincerely appreciate you for that brief insight, Mrs. Lace. And also, I would like to drive to the point of common fears or inner barriers as well, Mrs. Lace. What do you think in the experience you've had are also some common fears and also inner barriers that stop people from stepping into the potential they can already feel within themselves, Mrs. Lace?
hmm And this is such a great question. Why do we stay stuck in our patterns? And there's a big misconception that people are stuck because they lack awareness. I think most people actually do sense that there's more available to them. And even when I was working in a detox facility, and they understood how unhealthy their addictions were. Um, what keeps people stuck oftentimes is the fear of change or an aversion to any kind of discomfort at all. Um, just point blank, change is uncomfortable, and we try to avoid it as human beings. People typically decide to change when the pain of staying in the same patterns outweighs the discomfort of changing. And this is true of unhealthy relationships and unhealthy patterns. We just naturally gravitate towards what's familiar. So even if something isn't working, it still feels predictable, and that can actually feel safer than the unknown. So think about somebody you know who's in a healthy relationship and why do they stay? It could be a fear of being alone again. It could be a fear that they'll never find anyone else, or a fear that they can't support themselves in a way that they're used to, or fear that they won't find anyone better, or just an aversion to all of the work they're going to have to do to become independent of that relationship. So the other caveat of this is there's identity involved in this. You live in a certain way for a long period of time, and stepping outside of your role can feel really disorienting. So, for instance, if you leave a job or you end a relationship or a loved one dies, you might end up asking yourself, who am I if I'm no longer an engineer or a husband or a wife or a parent? Um, and there's also this fear of failure, fear of judgment. Sometimes we even fear what we might have to let go of in order to grow. And on top of that, we default to our short-term coping habits. So we overwork, we keep ourselves distracted, we engage in addictive behaviors like alcohol or shopping or gaming or social media. And it provides immediate relief, but it delays bigger, more meaningful change. So, interestingly, staying stuck has hidden benefits. It can actually mean less risk and less responsibility, and sometimes even more approval from others. So people end up with this tension. They're aware of their full potential, but they're also very attached to what's familiar, and they don't want to feel that discomfort. And then familiarity wins. So being aware of that can really change things up.
Thank you so much for the great insights, Mrs. Lace. Now you've brought a very profound insight for people to gain more enlightenment on how they can actually feel stuck. Being stuck has several ingredients that are attached to it because there are a lot of questions, fears, how they can actually move on, the career they're actually building, everything that comes up in their mind. And this can keep them in the position to actually be there or also be in the position to continue with that actually negative behavior or other perspective as well, which is not really helpful. That shows that despite every single thing one actually have to do in life or also have to profound to also bring out in life, there could be some things that could be a resistance. It is not about the change, it is about actually how one can actually build the inner side and also have the sense of confidence that things are going to be better. Mrs. Liz, I would just like to drive to the point of difference in regards to health dissatisfaction and unhealthy resentless. How do you think someone can tell the difference between a healthy dissatisfaction that signals growth and unhealthy resentless that only creates pressure and comparison, Mrs. Liz?
Okay. Great question. Not all discomfort is the same. So healthy dissatisfaction is actually quite useful to us. It feels grounded and it points you towards something. So even if you don't have total clarity, you feel a sense of direction, but it feels more like I want to move towards something better, even if I'm not clear on what that is yet. And it tends to lead to reflection and even eventually taking action. Whereas unhealthy restlessness feels quite different. It feels anxious and scattered and often driven by comparison. So you're feeling like you're not where you should be, and I should be further along, or I'm behind. So instead of clarity, it creates pressure and it leads to a lot of self-criticism. So, a simple way to tell the difference between healthy dissatisfaction and unhealthy restlessness is to ask yourself, is this change bringing me closer to myself and my values? Or is it pulling me into a comparison of other people? because healthy dissatisfaction leads to your growth, but unhealthy restlessness usually leads to self-criticism and comparison.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lace, for the beautiful insight. Now we know that when we are in the position for LD dissatisfaction, they actually give us the sense of actually being in the position whereby we develop. But for us to be in the position for um, criticism and other things like that are LD resentless, that we are being in the position whereby we do not want to actually release what is actually within us. We should be in the position of healthy and also being dissatisfied in every single thing so that we can be in the position whereby growth can actually thrive as well. And also, Mrs. Liz, I would like to drive to the point of step one can take in sensing their potential as well. How do you think listeners can actually also try to move from merely sensing their potential to actually taking practical steps towards becoming more of who they are meant to be, Mrs. Liz?
So instead of asking, what's my full potential? Say, what's one small action I can take that reflects the person that I want to become? So, really, the key is keeping it small and manageable enough so you can follow through. Um, don't wait until you feel confident or clear. You actually develop confidence and clarity, after you start something. Um, and I don't often quote Dr. Phil, but this is actually a good one. The difference between a dream and a goal is timeline and accountability. So dreams happen someday, while goals have specific dates and timelines for completion. So turn your intentions into scheduled actions. So if it's not on your calendar, it's a wish. So treat your new changes like something that are non-negotiable appointments. Don't wait until you just feel like doing something. Actually create a plan and break it down into manageable steps. So don't go overboard or overextend yourself. Just, build ways to stay accountable. You might ask a friend or a colleague to regularly check in on your progress. And just keep in mind, trying to overhaul everything at once, it usually backfires. So just really focus in on a couple of areas where progress would meaningfully shift your life. Treat early efforts as experiments, not as a verdict of your ability. And build in feedback loops. So seek input from people you trust, your mentors, so you're not operating in total isolation. And also expect some emotional resistance. Whenever I sit down with a new client, I always ask, how do you think you might sabotage your progress? And this question usually throws people off guard a little bit. But boredom and doubt and fear, it's all going to show up. So plan for it. Instead of assuming it's just going to stop because you're wanting to make a change, just, ask yourself, when my fear shows up, how am I going to handle it? And just again, really making sure that your goals are connected to your values. Because when your efforts are tied into something that genuinely matters to you, it's easier to be consistent and not constantly needing somebody, outer motivation. And then just revisit and adjust those goals regularly. Whatever happens, exactly, it never happens exactly the way we plan. So just allow yourself time to adjust without criticizing yourself and pay attention to those small shifts and improvements. And this actually reinforces that you're no longer just sensing potential, you're actually acting on it. And one really great piece of advice that I heard recently was, don't say fake it until you make it. Just start behaving like the person you want to become.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Liz. Now we've actually heard the huge message. Take action. Action is one of the greatest sources to light. Taking ourselves, developing ourselves, training ourselves. No one is going to do that for us. We do know we have parents, but training ourselves to actually bring out the positivity and also the productivity of our people to see us and our people to reflect who we really are. Taking the action is one of the most important things. Despite any goals or any dreams that we do have, we have to sit down and actually put it into work. And I sincerely appreciate you for bringing those expansion and also the explanation in those perspective as well, Mrs. Liz. Mrs. Liz, there is also a question I normally ask during the end of the show. From our forefathers, from our ancestors, there are a lot of beautiful things that do exist during our forefathers' time that is missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would like to bring back to our time today, Mrs. Liz, what do you think that thing will be, Mrs. Liz?
Oh, community. I think we're really missing community these days. I think we are, even in the world of social media that connects us, I think so many people feel more and more disconnected from our families and our society and our world. So if anything, when I look back, what they knew was we there's that expression, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to keep us happy. And we are missing out on that. And especially as people become, they go, and I'm not saying this one way or another, but this is where religion has actually helped people, bring together people in churches and mosques and temple, and it brings community. But for those people who don't believe in this, we have to find other ways to connect with one another on a deep, meaningful level and really be there for each other. And it doesn't have to be 100 people. It can be a small, meaningful group. And just seeing the uptick in loneliness and despair in the world, I think that our ancestors were better positioned than we are today.
Completely agree, Mrs. Lees. In our historic time, there are a lot of beauty. We have beauty in our time today. We have prosperity, we have technology, in fact, now we have artificial intelligence, which is actually huge. But despite all these things, we do have this beauty of humanity, kindness, love. It's always within every single one of us, whether we like it or not. But the beauty of our world is that due to the isolation and what we see around us and every single thing, also the pressure, it has caused a lot of issues and also the isolation as well. So we have to try our best to give the sense of release and also try to build the sense of physical and human connection, whether online, and also the beauty of the churches and also the mosques you said as well, which still prevents that sense of coming together physically, showing the sense of peace, gathering and actually celebrating something together. All these things plays a very huge role in our emotions, in our development, and also show kindness to one another as well. Mrs. Liz, I also want to use this opportunity to thank you for the time and the opportunity. As a person who have actually experienced what we call grief and also be in the position to actually coach people, encourage people, and also put people through the right path so they can live a more fulfilled and also get a right direction in their life. Thank you so much, Mrs. Liz.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated this opportunity to chat with you on this important subject,
All right, Mrs. Liz. Have a wonderful day, Mrs. Liz. Bye bye.
and you as well. Bye bye.